Welcome to Brazen Education with Educator Barnes, a podcast with a focus on speaking your truth, being transparent to help others, and having no shame about it. Because we can't move forward until the truth is known.
All right, it is 2025 and Brazen Education is back for our first episode of this year. And with me today, I have Justine Gonzalez, who is the founder of Educator Aid. And if you recognize her, she has been on the show before. So Justine, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. And I did not even realize that your background music is reggae. I love it. It's so brazen.
You know what's funny? Everybody loves my song, at least the people that make comments on it. So maybe they hate it and they're not telling me, except my children. My children say it's lame. So I told them I'm not changing this. So I'm still sticking to it, even though they think it's lame. I'm sticking to it. So they can just mind their business. It's not that they are subscribers to the podcast anyway. So something about they get to hear me all the time at home. They don't need to tune in. So that's okay.
They probably think it's like that would be an interesting poll to ask like children of parents with podcasts. They're probably just like, oh, that's just mommy's time to play dress up with her online friends.
Yeah, I don't think they take too much of what I do too seriously. So that's what kids are for. They're there to humble you. Speaking about children, we're here today to talk about some important topics. Talking about education bills. The legislative session is happening right now. And there's a lot of things going on. Me personally, I've been keeping track of the education bills through Chalkbeat, Indiana. They are an education-focused platform. But what the cool thing is for them is they have this legislative tracker. So they have all the education bills from the House and the Senate, and every Friday they update it. So in real time, you have an idea what happened. And the other thing I like at the very top of their tracker, they explain things like how a bill becomes a law. Because unfortunately, if you have spent any time on social media, you have noticed that some people have struggled with that concept of how that works. But I am going to read one thing from that document that kind of gives us some information that's important. They said that this year, bills must receive a third reading in their originating chamber, where that's the Senate or the House, by February 20th, or they'll be considered dead before they move to the opposite chamber. Then they must receive a third reading in the opposite chamber by April 15th. Why these days are important is because bills have to be read multiple times and by deadlines to be considered still alive. So there's a lot of bills that we won't even have time to talk about today. And there are bills to talk about, not to talk about. Some bills are introduced and you're like, I don't even think that would go anywhere, but maybe that's not even the purpose that bill was written. And maybe it wasn't for it to go anywhere, but to make you agree to something else. So you have those types of taxes as well. And then every time it gets read, things could be added and things could be subtracted. I need you to accept, if you're listening or viewing, whether you're doing that in real time or in the playback, that you're going to leave here without closure. We don't have answers. We don't know what's going to become a law. All we're going to bring to you today is our background and try to talk about some different things. This episode is being recorded on February 3rd, and today was a protest, the Day Without Immigrants. And I went to 3 different schools today. And in those 3 different schools, there were attendance issues. One school had 200 kids out of 600. There are educators I know from other schools across Indianapolis saying people didn't come to school today. And if you Google that, USA Today has a little article about it. It's talking about immigrants and people that are supporting immigrant families decided not to go to school, not to go to work, not to patronize and spend their money anywhere, to let us understand what it really means if they were not here and what that impact is like. So I thought it was important to kind of name that because a lot of bills that have been developed has been targeting that particular population. So I don't know how you feel hearing that a little bit, Justine. I know you had thoughts about that.
I think that it's a unique time that wherever you find yourself, there are ways to get involved and there are ways to learn and to be involved with issues that even if they do not directly impact you, you can make decisions for how you want to choose to live your life. I think the only thing that comes to mind that I personally want to name, and in case anybody out there listening doesn't know this, there's been a lot of contentions for many, many decades and that's near and dear to my heart with the relationship of the United States and Puerto Rico. And that one of the new Senate bills, and I won't go any deeper than just letting you all know this, but one of the specific Senate bills, similar to what Dr. Barnes is stating about, there's a lot, and a lot of them might have a lot of layers that maybe they do speak to you, maybe you're not as familiar with them. There's no reason to have like a shame or a guilt when you're reviewing information. So I think that's important when you're reading these things. But specifically, I want to name Senate Bill 273, which is actually the governor in Puerto Rico is a supporter of the president-elect. And this bill has come into play because currently there's a management of the Instituto Cultura de Puertorriqueño, and that they're trying to vote basically that the U.S. Economic Development Commission would actually take over managing cultural sites and different things in Puerto Rico. Would not be a good shift for the people on the island. And so similar to what you're naming, there's so many things happening, not only with immigration, but specifically then in K-12 education. But that was the big one that was on my radar as far as just national things happening that also do affect regardless of where you find yourself. So like for you today, where you're based, attendance was a major issue. Just even having families come to school or let their child go to school. And then meanwhile, we have these other very national, very real dialogues and sometimes not dialogues, but shouting matches going on. So I wanted to name that and put that out there, but to switch the hands from ICP, just one Senate bill like that could change millions of people's lives and millions of families' lives. So just putting that out there, because if you don't know about certain issues, it's not a gotcha. Dante and I don't know all these things at all. We don't really have answers. We're just here to talk about them and make sure that, there's some awareness with our K-12 colleagues.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that's the most important is just to stay tuned. I know as myself, as an early educator, I didn't see the importance of keeping up with education policy. I did eventually do a policy fellowship for educators where I learned a lot about, education policy and how it directly impacted me. I have spoken at the State House for a school education bill. I think that was in 2018. I haven't been doing that for a while, but now I stay informed because when things do become a law, it does impact what happens in the classroom. So there's a lot of bills. I'm going to start with the one that's been like having people go off online and just in person. House Bill 1136, which is the School Corporation Reorganization Bill. Some people felt some type of way because I wrote about that particular bill. There were so many questions about it, and I just got tired of being asked about it. But essentially, that particular bill says that if 50% of students who are in a corporation or who are bound to a school corporation is not in that school corporation based on the daily membership count, that school district could be dissolved and turned into an all charter school district. Because I spent some time editing a publication in New Orleans, I thought it was important to note the fact that New Orleans went to that. The recovery school district came, and they became 100% parish schools. They became 100% charter. This school year was the first year that the school board actually has a traditional public school back under their belt. So that's just something to people to note. Like when these things happen, a lot of times your place is not the first place it happens. So the first thing people are like, I can't believe this. The first thing I tell people is like, search, has this happened anywhere else before? What happened there? Because that can inform what you do next. And there are 5 school districts that, if this becomes a law, that would be impacted. The 2 biggest that people have been talking about is Indianapolis Public Schools and Gary School Corporation. And so those are the 2. And Gary, they just got out of state takeover this school year. So if this became a law, they would be like back, in the hands of someone else again. So that's the bill that's been getting those shouting matches, Justine.
Yes. So yes, we both were raised up and spent a lot of our careers in Indiana. And so I'm quite familiar with school choice. And it's the thing that stuck out to me beyond that initial House bill that kind of got into the headlines a couple of weeks ago in Indiana. The things that when I went more in depth with the tool you were talking about, Talkbeat, when I looked more specifically then, one of the things I found interesting was that SB 336 is a proposal for property tax revenue to be shared with charter schools. So one of the things that I'm finding, and I've found over the years, because I literally have gone to the legislative bills and read them in different sessions and stuff. To your point, I didn't do that when I was still in the classroom. I followed politics as much as I could, but with this one in particular, when you go into the layers, and I think you mentioned something really important earlier about things have to be read multiple times. And these also have to be done in a certain timeline. The people who have prepared these bills, it is my opinion, they're fully aware of the timelines. They're fully aware of the information that's coming out. What's your thoughts when we go deeper into these layers? These are 2 school systems that I've worked in throughout my career in different capacities. What are your thoughts when it comes to this type of, it is causing people to have yelling matches? It's causing a lot of friction, just in general. But what stood out to me was going a little deeper into the specific Senate bills and the state level of how that differentiated, because typically if you follow the money, it's going to lead back to where the source of who created the bill is.
And that's the one thing that I find interesting, is just all the people that tend to know each other, and then how these bills kind of pop up. And like, what is the benefit if this bill gets passed? What is the benefit to universities? Are universities going to be ones that are helping schools get set up? Because in Indiana, you have to remember, when this charter school movement got started, you had universities that were chartering schools.
Right.
So you have to think about what's the benefit. Are they going to be offering programs where people can do transition to teaching, to go be at a charter school but not have a teaching license? And so like there's all these other things that come of that. And then I think about the whole revenue sharing between public charters and traditional public schools, because that's the thing that charter schools have wanted. And some people are just been surprised that they asked for that. And I'm like, it's like you open Pandora's box and then inspect all the stuff that was in the box. Like you brought somebody in to quote unquote save the children and save these schools that you just threw your hands up on. And then you were surprised that these people wanted more and more and more and more. We don't, it's simple supply and demand. We don't have enough children to in my opinion, be creating more charter schools, but also a lot of these charter school networks, they keep talking about going to scale. And I'm like, how about you handle the one school that's still failing first before you try to replicate and make another school? And so we don't have a track record of success with
Right.
the model that they are suggesting. And then I was talking to a friend about this, and she said, so one of my friends, her kid's boundary school is an innovation school, or her
Okay.
kid goes to another innovation school. And she was telling me a lot of people in the neighborhood still go to that because that's the boundary school before it became a charter school in IPS. So she was saying to me, the data is kind of skewed. So you're saying that if more than 50% of kids are not enrolled in the district school, but some people are going to the boundary school by default that's now a charter school because that's walkable for their houses. So a lot of times there's this extra context that we are not even talking about. The fact of, so my school was a traditional IPS school and now it's an innovation charter school, but this school is still the school that I can walk to from my house and I don't
That's
have a car.
right. That's
So
right.
that's the other part. I think when I listen to conversations, people are not talking about the people that go to IPS innovation schools because it's the closest school, not because they actually chose that school. That school was still chosen for them due to the limitations that they had.
It's almost like school choice if.
Yeah.
And that's how, honestly, that's how I've always felt. And I was, now I'll date myself, but I started teaching in IPS in 06, and I was part of one of their first turnaround takeover models, but they brought a principal out of retirement. We didn't have buku extra dollars. We had to make AYP stuff, but she got to hand pick and we got to extend our calendar. Those were actually the only two frivolity things. You didn't make extra money. We chose to go there if we wanted to. And that's where I chose to be my first year teaching. And that name of that game, and having done a lot of transformation and turnaround work my entire career, that has changed. And what I unfortunately found pretty early on dealing with charter, private, and public is it's very similar. I actually just saw an interview recently with one of our colleagues, Emil. He's the founder of InnoPower in Indianapolis. Shout out to Emil. But he said a very poignant quote, and it is one that I found myself saying since I started teaching and being surrounded by kind of that buzz. If people go, oh, turnaround, oh, innovation, oh, transformation, or whatever they're calling efforts of reimagining and redesigning how we let kids experience school, how we create an environment for them to experience school in the ways they need and want and desire and are culturally relevant to them. He said, on this interview I watched a few days ago, the one thing, regardless of what type of school or structure we even have, that often people forget about is we're not concerned about our customers' feedback. And our customer is the student. So even when I've tried to pilot throughout the years, student-facing surveys and honest staff-facing surveys, but the student-facing surveys, never even given a chance. No, God forbid we ask the students what they're actually experiencing. Now, do I know teachers? Yeah. Do I know teachers who will survey their kids and have good relations? Absolutely. And are there lots of tactics you can do this? And I know many of you who are watching do this. Yeah, absolutely. It's those of our colleagues who they still are waiting for somebody to tell them what to do, or they're getting caught in these details of all of these bills and things that come out. At the end of the day, these things have an impact. All of it has an impact no matter what. But at the end of the day, we are all responsible for whatever learners are in front of us. And that no bill can get away from that. And I do think we're at an interesting time where, as educators and education professionals, we have to be alert of where we are consuming our information and then what we decide we're going to do with that information. Plain and simple, like hard stop.
And we have to be willing to take information from several sources. When I was younger, my dad would just watch the news on Sunday, like all the national news, and he would watch all the channels, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, C-SPAN. Like, I was like, why are you doing this? And my dad said something to me I'll never forget. he says, even though the news, they say they are not biased, everybody has an angle. And to get the full picture, you have to read all the angles and then make an informed conclusion. So even now, when I consume news, I consume it from all networks because I need to understand. Because some people are like, "Oh man, it's just too much. Like it's too much. I can't even say the president's name. Like it's just too much." And I'm like, "But life is still happening, and it's a certain level of privilege when you can just raise up your hands and check out and not have to pay attention to what's happening." Many of us don't have the luxury of just checking out. And because we haven't had the luxury of checking out, we actually have skills to not freak out and fall apart when we are consuming information from multiple sources. So if you're one of those people watching, and if you're in the church that say ouch if I stepped on your toe, and you're one of those people that's been freaking out every single time something gets released from the White House, you might want to think about like, why am I so worked up? Why do I keep checking out? And I'm not saying not take care of yourself and mental health and all that stuff. But some people I'm actually concerned about because they just keep checking out. I'm like, look, we only a few weeks into this presidency. We got 4 years. Like, I want to need you to get some plans and get together. So you have that bill. And then there's some other bills as well that I found there's bills that have been referred to a committee and nothing has happened with that bill. So one bill that would be Senate Bill 34 is the literacy endorsement. That one's been referred to committee, but it nothing has happened with that. But that bill is asking to reduce how much work teachers have to do to get this literacy endorsement. Because essentially, essentially this law came into fruition saying that, elementary teachers, you need to get this endorsement, and people are doing hours of work on top of teaching, on top of doing all these other things. And there wasn't a really good plan to figure out how these teachers would get all this done. So I appreciate that bill was put up, but it doesn't look like that bill is going anywhere. And I know some teachers are probably like, sign. And I also think that some people are not listening carefully to teachers, because when teachers have been pushing back on that literacy bill, there's not one teacher I've come across and said, I don't want to learn how to teach students how to read. What they are saying is, I need time to learn this skill, and you're trying to shove it down my throat without acknowledging that this is a lot of work, and you're not you're not taking anything off my plate while saying I must get this done. So I appreciate that bill was written, but it doesn't, that bill, just like Senate Bill 35, that cursive writing bill, every single year, that bill appears, goes nowhere. So, and you know what? There's some plus for us, Justine, because, they have been hiring folks that can read cursive writing. So I'm against this bill, and I know it's not going anywhere, but I'm kind of glad. We got that lock on those cursive writing. If we ever
I mean, it was the after lunch recess, calm down. My students still had cursive writing folders, and many of them loved it. Okay. I did want to, so it's funny you mentioned that, because there was also specific allocation for teacher retention grants. There's not a whole lot said about it, but that was interesting and also appealing to me, that there was some level of productivity. That was SB 335. The one I want to point out that caught my attention and could impact a lot of teachers, but uh-oh. Can you still hear me okay? I think I froze. I think I froze for a minute on my end. So 366, it says remove the requirement for the superintendent to discuss with teachers their plans or the system for teacher evaluation. So essentially, when I read that, it's very specific, and it very much is, at the end of the day, I'm letting the superintendent of a district do whatever they want, and they don't actually have to tell their teachers if they change how they evaluate them. They can decide. That's how I read that. But I'm only throwing it out there, not even to be, a pot stirrer or anything like that, but to say, look very carefully at the language, of any of these things. It's similar to the executive orders that the White House has been putting out. There's an entire section about radical indoctrination. Just read the stuff carefully. And I'm saying this as a person who has been in whatever the generation has decided to call it for whatever time period: cultural competence, cultural awareness, cultural intelligence, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, identity work. Let's keep going with the names. But the big thing, a lot of it that has come out in these different bills, even specific to Indiana, has to do with our students, and this is, I'm paraphrasing language from these orders, will learn what a great nation the United States is. So I'm saying this, and I went into the little soliloquy because I have had pushback since I started being mentored by Dr. Patricia Payne in Indianapolis Public Schools 2 decades ago. So no matter what it's called, it being having courageous conversations about things like gender and race and things that typically do make any human uncomfortable if they don't have vast lived experiences with a specific thing, that's normal. That is normal that people feel discomfort talking about things that maybe they don't have to talk about or experience all the time. That's normal. What's not normal is going to great lengths to put into place ways to make it sound like that's indoctrination. So from that argument, and as a DEIB practitioner, large air quotes, because I don't like labeling myself, I've already been getting the calls, even pre-George Floyd, from the Daughters of Liberty to different districts I've worked with. I've already been like, so if it's those things, and I'm saying this as a disclaimer, if there are teachers specifically in Indiana that are concerned, or they're like, work is going away, or we're no longer going to do SEL. I've seen stuff about pushback on SEL work, and it's being lumped into the same, they've told our kids how to feel. And it's like, no. So I would say with everything, read it carefully, and also know there's always an agenda when it does come to the political stuff. There just is. There's always somebody's agenda, and it very rarely is children. And that is who it should be. So that would be my little take on the different, like I saw it with SB 235, DEI prohibitions.
And I was telling you, so in that,
stuff about religious schooling and bullying, that was a whole other one. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. But I wanted to put that out there as a person who's been a practitioner in that space, and also say it's okay if you're nervous. Whatever you feel is what you feel. I'm saying that to hopefully offer reassurance that even when there haven't been executive orders, there's always people that have pushed back. There's always people who have had different agendas, and that's normal. That's human nature.
Yeah, I wanted, because when you were rounding off the terms for a Senate Bill 235,
right.
it has 16 concepts that they would like to ban, and some of those concepts are bias, allyship, cultural appropriation, microaggression, social justice, heteronormativity, and gender theory. And it also talks about,
hang on, read what it says right before that list.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. And then it talks about, like, you can't have any trainings. You can't influence, no trainings to influence employees in reference with race, sex, color, or ethnicity. So, and then like not having people that, and not using money for like diversity, equity, and inclusion office or officer. And this one has passed the Committee on Judiciary, and it's waiting for a second reading in the Senate. And that was as of the last time that this Chuck B. Indiana tracker was updated. But it is just, I had to laugh when I saw the word allyship. And it's like, being an ally is now being like, there's all these things. And what's interesting, I feel like people that support this bill, they couldn't even define most of the terms and practices or concepts they're even trying to ban. Like they don't even have the understanding of the thing that they're banning. It's just like people who call school districts and want to ban books and they've never read the book. They don't even know what the book is about. They don't even have the context for whatever they're trying to protest. They heard something and somebody told them something. They don't check no facts. Their kids most of the time haven't even read the book, haven't even seen the book. Their kids even know the book was in the library.
It's a fear thing, right? So even when we have these reactions and we see different things, all it's doing is inciting fear, and fear is not going to take you anywhere good. It's not. Like none of us can say, yes, fear has really solidified so much in my life. No, that is not true. What I was getting at, Sean, it says it bans state entities from promoting opinions on a list of 16 concepts. The reason why I found that to be curious, it bans state entities. So technically public schools are state entities, technically. They're also kind of like, I kind of always consider federal entities too, because they receive federal dollars, but it says from promoting opinions on a list of 16 concepts. So they're against someone promoting their opinions. The problem is when they name what you name, like that list, bias, allyship, microaggression, social justice, these are actual terms with clear definitions that have been taught for decades. So this isn't just people pontificating. And so that's why I think it's curious, even some of the language behind some of the things, because, okay, so you don't want someone promoting opinions about these concepts. Okay, I don't promote opinions. I'll give you the defined what they mean. This is the definition of this. Here's some practical ideas. How will you apply this learning in your own life?
And it makes me wonder because we started off talking about like the national level, and at the national level, there's this whole, we're not celebrating Heritage Months anymore. So if you on your platform, said celebrate Black History Month, that could be seen as an opinion that's promoting some type of thing, because your opinion was that this needs to be celebrated because you said celebrate blah blah blah. So I think what will be interesting is how it's going to be, what consequences would happen if somebody does that. Because of course, if you put something in there that's prohibiting that, you're going to find someone that's going to be guilty of it, and you're going to make an example of them. And so that's the thing. I think people are scrambling, because that's why you had the whole debacle with the Tuskegee Airmen videos being taken down. And then it's like, oh, not that. Okay, psych, we're going to put it back. So you're going to have a lot of people that's so scared that they're just going to jump back and not do anything. And I'm just like, I think people should just be overreacting right now and waiting, and then like using some common sense. Like the Tuskegee Airmen were real human beings that did real things in the circumstances that they were forced into. And now we're just not going to talk about it. Like that doesn't make any kind of sense at all. But it just goes, if you talk to a lot of people that were in the military who are Black, they have a different experience than other people have had. So I felt really bad for Black veterans when that happened, because it's just like, another slap in their face to see something like this, because, a lot of Black veterans I know, like they were like an inspiration to them, the Tuskegee Airmen.
Right. So what do you think this means then for, we're kicking off Black History Month in the States right now. What do you think this means for teachers? What would you advise for teachers? Because I could see how that like how us even talking about this might sound scary, or, oh, I'm going to get in trouble. Once again, believe me, there's always been people who have racist ideologies in K-12 education. Okay. They're not probably moving any different now that some of these things are out there, and some of it is so outrageous that, for example, when you look at some of the national executive orders and about teaching about a great nation and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, well, if I'm a teacher, and again, You might approach this differently, Shantae. I'll take that to mean I should teach about everything involving the Declaration of Independence, including how it was specifically written to dehumanize enslaved Africans who were brought to this country and who the country was built by. So what would you advise teachers who are feeling like, oh my goodness, my district is scared, or I heard so-and-so say this, or I'm hearing this, it just steals my joy? What charge would you give to people, especially as we begin a celebration of Black History Month?
Well, I think a lot of people are concerned about losing their livelihood. Like if I lose my job, I cannot pay my mortgage, I can't pay my rent, I can't pay the daycare bill. So fear has a chokehold on people because that's real. And with like I'm gonna take a side note, I'm gonna come back. Like what's happening was like Target and all these places dropping their initiatives, and people like, I want to boycott. And I'm just like, y'all not gonna do nothing. Y'all not got no civil rights energy. And this is what I mean by that. When you think about the Montgomery boycott, you had people that actually boycotted. So they did not use the public transportation system. Then you had the people that didn't boycott, but they drove the people to work. And so, there's always multiple lanes that we can take. And so when I think back into the classroom, like, what should we do? I'm so scared. I can't do this. There are people that's doing the work, and there's people that's supporting the work. And so you have to really understand, what type of school am I in? Am I in a school that's going to allow me to do the work and they're going to have my back? Am I in a community that if I lose my job as a teacher, that you got this month's rent, so and so got next month's rent? Because that's what we're talking about. If we're talking about systemic change, that's actually what it looks like. If somebody puts their neck on the line to fight for something and their livelihood gets attacked, are we actually going to support that person? And that's what happened during the civil rights movement. Those people got fed. You in jail, we're going to bail you out. You got to get to work, and you protest, I'm going to get you to work. I don't feel like we got that energy. We don't got the energy to be getting watered down by hoses and all this stuff that's happening. We don't have the energy. And another side note, a lot of time when people look at those photos of people getting hit with hoses, they're not adults. Many of those people are children. That's right. I mentioned that because this is who we're talking about. All these education bills impact children. And those are people that keep getting left out of the conversation. So when I think about kids, how can I, as an educator, censor these children education? Because they have the full picture. And what I say every month during Black History is 365 days a year, 366 when it's a leap year.
Absolutely.
I'm teaching incorporating Black humans that are already part of American history into my curriculum year round. I don't got to worry about what they're saying in Black History Month, because I'm saying in August, I was talking about this. September, I was talking about this. October. This is just a normal day in my classroom.
Look, hey, I had pushback when Obama was president. I had a picture of him in my classroom. And I had a principal in IPS try to get me and say, oh, well, you're trying to show political affiliation. I said, no, ma'am. He's right up there with all of my other significant historical figures in the classroom. And he's been up there all year. So I think that, again, first of all, nobody's coming to take your job because of a presidential executive order. That's a bunch of nonsense. And I don't say that lightly or in a bypassing way. I say it in a way that, as Shantae said, our ancestors and relatives were doing very, very difficult sacrificial things, more so than even just running their mouths on a podcast, which we love to do and is also part of our practices. But I think that we all have to just literally pause when we see something and understand, why am I having the reaction I'm having? Do I need to have this reaction? Do I need to have this reaction right now? And is this really going to affect what I get to do here in this classroom or here in this school every day with the students and the community that I love? And if you can't say that you love the students and community where you serve, then you shouldn't be there. Hard stop. I'm a huge advocate for. If you don't love children and you specifically don't love and want to learn everything you can about the children in front of you, regardless of how freaking uncomfortable that makes you, it's not for you. Then just go do something else, because there are literally a ton, hundreds of millions of new jobs being created from tech, whatever. But I'm saying that, and I will never not be relentless about saying that. And I've said it since I started teaching, because for the life of me, if you want to stay miserable in your job, by all means, stay miserable in your job, but don't do it when you're teaching children, because they don't get the choice of who they're choosing to be their teacher. So to me, it's a whole different moral obligation at this point. Number one, are you able to teach children how to read and write well? And also, you have a moral imperative that if you are not content doing what you're doing, if you have zero interest in getting to know your number one customers, your students, then no, you shouldn't be in this profession, because it's already hard enough. It's already hard enough for all the reasons that we've named. What would you say about that? Because obviously we have retention issues, we have shortage issues, but in my opinion, I think those are a result from poor political past bills and not valuing our educators.
Well, speaking of valuing our educators, we have Senate Bill 146, which is teacher compensation, and it has a few things in there. One is increasing the minimum teacher salary to $45,000, and then we have the 20 days of paid parental leave for full-time teachers. And then I believe there's like 10 days, I think, if they're not full-time. And there are some schools that have some type of things, but what I love is that it's parental leave, because humans are created by more than one individual, and it's not just the human carrier of that individual. So I'm glad it says parental leave, and there's been so many people that's been fighting against how can I say this? People are like, well, y'all can time your pregnancy and just have the baby in the summer. Like, no, I can have my baby whenever I feel like having a baby.
Do people hear how that sounds, Shantae? Hey, schedule your pregnancy around work. Work comes first. How does that? That's how that sounds.
That's exactly how crazy. But that's what people expect, and that's why people have such a pushback. And then Senator Huntley, she said, that's only 4 weeks. So we're still that's not a lot that we're asking for. But I think that should be a top of the mind for people, because a lot of times we ask teachers, and I had a principal say this to me. I'm not going to name that principal, but you'll know this much. It was when I had kids. So if you know my history and I didn't have kids, it's not them. Said to me, I need you to be more focused on these students. And that same day, I was talking about my classroom, because I got called from the daycare and they wanted me to come pick up my boys because they got sick. And I got twins. And so what happened when my kids were young? One would get sick. Let's say it's Tuesday. That one home. And then like 2 days later, the other one would get sick. So anytime one of my sons got sick, and my husband and I would trade off, but the principal just didn't understand. Like, this is not. I'm not saying get sick with little babies. That's like I would rather be here. But we ask teachers, you need to learn all you can, do what you can to make these kids learn. But your own kids, figure it out some other time. We don't got time for that. So I think this bill that's asking for 20 days of paid parental leave is saying thank you to the teachers, that is saying, hey, you deserve when you create another human or adopt a human, because it includes adoption, and it also stillbirths. They can still get that as well. I think it's important. And if you can't raise the salaries, give us something else. Give us something that's meaningful.
Even the fact that we are just now at raising the base salary to $45,000. So even if you do a quick little math, let me do 45K divided by 365. Okay, that's 123. Okay, so that means your daily rate of pay, of course, this isn't your take home because benefits and all that come out too, but we're going to round it up and leave it at even 45K. So that's 123 a day. Let's just say you maximized your planning time during your prep and 15-minute lunch as well. And you could just work 8 hours a day. So that divided by 8, hourly. That's a teaching rate of $15.41, folks. So the other reality is, I think what's also happening is because our government has, functioned as a pseudo democracy. I'm using it that way because at the end of the day, I think that there's a lot of people who benefit, such as the developer of Science of Reading, who benefited from lining the pockets of lobbyists and mandating that there were really stringent guidance for people to have to be qualified. And what we saw actually on the onset, most states who have adopted the NAEP scores that just came out from 2024 are like the lowest in 30 years of history of doing that exam. So because how even some of these politicians have gotten into bed with businesses, et cetera, that I think so much of that, it's doing this, right? It's not usually actually that Shantae is a parent over here and she has a problem with me over here. No, it's usually because we've been taken advantage of as K-12 educators our whole careers. And then we've been used as pawns in bills like these that most of it doesn't necessarily affect us. It affects our kids in really bad ways. And it affects the access to resources and tools we need to teach. But as teachers ourselves, often we have the degrees and we could figure out some place to get a job. To your point and full circle, what does that mean and the implications when you have policy that says we're going to disband the largest school system in the state of Indiana?
Yeah, and then those teachers also lose access to the union. And so the unions,
Right.
whether you're pro or against unions, I think we all can acknowledge their job is to negotiate the best working conditions for teachers. And some schools are not the best working conditions.
Nope.
There are some schools, and that's the other thing with some charter schools. I'm like, so you want an old IPS building for $1 that looks like trash, and you want to send black and brown babies to that school. But you wouldn't send your own kids to a school where there's mold in the ceiling and there's a leak over here and there's rats going through the school and roaches over here.
Right.
And this equipment doesn't work. And the blacktop on the playground hasn't been fixed. And who knows how long.
And there's no AC. There's no AC either.
Yeah, and the heat may or may not work. You got old windows, so the classroom's gonna be cold when it's wintertime. So that's the thing that bothers me, because it's not that some of these schools even look that great, and we're saying it is okay, little child, that I send you into a school. And I would imagine if you ask those kids what they want their school to look like, they would say, I want a library. I want a school where I could do sports. And sometimes these charter schools do not offer sports. They don't even have a library, but you allegedly on your little flyer talking about, oh, we're going to get your kid reading. How are you going to get your kid reading and you can't even have a library in the school?
You don't have books.
But you prioritize reading. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, you hear, and I'm not going to name the school, but this morning, I was at a charter school this morning for reasons I was there. And I was trying to get in, and that was a whole debacle. But the lobby was full. And a person comes from the lobby and says, this school doesn't have transportation. Are you aware of that before you fill out this enrollment? That's the first thing that the person from the front desk said to the person in the lobby. We don't have transportation. And so a lot of times, because remember, I tell you, I look at stuff for all sources. And there was like some charter association. And a lady's like, I'm tired of these lies. So I'm like, let me see what the lies are. And essentially she's saying it's against the law for charter schools to not serve all kids. And I'm like, okay, so you're not going to provide the context of when you say stuff to parents that makes them say self-select out. You don't have transportation. Or your baby has an IEP. Oh, we don't have a special education teacher right now. So you want to make somebody select out. So we say they have choices and we're offering these things, but you are either offering something that's not the best and you're hoping the person self-selects out, or you're accepting that kid and know you can't provide the service, but you still gonna collect your 6-figure check and go about your business, whether Tyrone reads or not. Like you don't care.
And that's where I like cut that hard stop line of like, just go do a different job. Because if you don't even want to put in the time, energy, and effort to understand who are these amazing, unique, incredible little humans in front of you, and to the point where you're not even willing to display base level display images of people who look like your students, have books with characters who look like your student in base level as much as possible, provide a diverse range of literature. If you can't do that and you don't want to do that, then you shouldn't be teaching in this day and age. You shouldn't. Or choose a private school that's very restrictive and meets your views. But I also think, honestly, Dante, I think this can be very applicable conversation to a lot of adults out there who have children, and they might not know anything about K-12 itself, like what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, I think that's what else the pandemic taught us is, no, if you want to take your kids' education into your hands, why do you need an executive order to say and outline these things in this way? And I have a family member who believes this way. They pulled their kids from school, fine. But they did it 3 times, tried 3 different things. They tried a homeschool pod. They tried a very small, it was public, but it was a conservative school district where it was located, like as far as student populace, as far as politicians, blah, blah, blah. But they still weren't content. These are typically the people I see pushing for some of the bills that we discussed, specifically about disbanding public schools. It's often the people who have never really sent their kids to public schools. It's often the people, like you said, who haven't actually read or utilized the books that they claim need to be banned. And then on top of it, what I will say is, yes, what school choice gave you was, as a parent, if you don't want to send your child to any schools, you don't have to. So I think that's the other reality. If you don't like the setup of the public district school that your kid is in, then by all means, if you're in school choice, use the dollars and go to the district you want to take your kid to. You're in a school choice state.
I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but there was something about a homeschool bill, because Indiana, and I hope I'm not wrong, last time I looked at this, we're like the loosest when it comes to the regulation for homeschool.
We had a huge issue with out of school youth. And I believe
you just say I'm homeschooling, and that's pretty much it.
The withdraw to homeschool crisis, it's in the 20,000s, typically how that was. What it says now, which I really don't even think is much different, and what it says now is that if you withdraw your student, you have to show adequate enrollment in some type of online curriculum in what you're doing. Now, can you game anything? Yes, you can. And I think that was actually like a CYA, so to speak, for Indiana, because Indiana has been on a national radar for years, specifically for out of school youth, because it was 0026 back in the day, withdraw to homeschool. And those lists, I think at that time, which would have been about a decade ago when I started a high school in Indiana, then I think it was upwards of 25,000 kids every year that withdrew to homeschool.
Yeah, and I know a lot of times
they weren't being homeschooled. Let's be clear.
I know there was the people that was messing with the high school enrollment when they knew, Johnny was going to graduate. Johnny is now being homeschooled, so it didn't tank the school's rates. And then you just get the people that are pulling their kids, for whatever reason, which that's your prerogative, but it's still pretty loose here. And because you may have to say I'm doing whatever, but nobody comes and checks, and no one really comes to see what you're doing.
And who loses out, right? Like, what does your kid want? what does your kid need? What do they want? What do they want to do in their life? Like the world is changing really fast. You can get a lot of certifications and stuff online that you couldn't get even 5 years ago. And so it does go back to number one, parents need to be in the driver's seat, and you have the autonomy. You do. Even if these orders are scary to you, or you've thought that you have issues with your child's school district or whatever, that could be true. But just remember, at the end of the day, you still have that autonomy. And my goodness, if I can give any plead for teachers and parents alike, books, 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 books. Get books in front of your kids. Get literature in front of your kids. Like, it's becoming a dying art, but it's also becoming a moral imperative. So if you've looked at the NAEP scores from the past year, like I mentioned, I mean, it's maybe around 30% of our fourth graders are reading at or above grade level.
And you said,
That's the United States.
In the driver's seat, and I want to say they don't need to be asleep at the wheel. Because one of the things that people know, my phrase I always say is parenting is an action word. You got to do things. And what I mean by that is, so when I was at that school I mentioned, I was at 3 different schools and 3 different, they weren't connected. They weren't in the same school district. So I was in 3 different places today. But that first school I was at for an hour. Within that hour where I was at, because I was observing some instruction, but I could see outside in the front desk. Across that hour I was there, parents, and I'm like, why is your kid coming to school almost 2 hours late? And I mean, and it just wasn't one family. And so sometimes you hear these families like, I'm taking my kid out of whatever public school, and I'm gonna put him in a charter school because that school wasn't teaching my child. But your kid was always missing the bus. You weren't ever, or you decided to take them to school and they were coming to school on time. So how did the public school fail your child when you wasn't even making sure your child was getting to school on time every single day and the whole time? And now you got them at a charter school and they late again. Like where do you take the accountability? Because I am with the thought of like parents are not trained teachers. So there are some stuff that teachers are responsible for. But you want me to work a miracle and your kid missing 2 hours of the class? No, like
that part. Yeah, that part is so critically important too, because yes, you have the autonomy. Okay, well then model for your child what, like, don't pigeonhole them the opposite way, because I think what we're also seeing is also a result of how work has changed. And because so many students that are in school right now have millennial and Gen Z parents, I think that's a whole other conversation about intergenerational communication, but there just isn't, from what I see, there isn't the same like excitement about learning at home. Like I remember at 3 years old being excited to have a little handwriting book to practice handwriting. Like a little work.
Like what message, the unintended message you're sending to your kid when you take your kid to school late every single day, you're saying school is not important. You didn't open your mouth and say the word school is not important, but you're saying to your kid, it doesn't even matter if you're here on time.
You showed it
repeatedly over time. And so like some of the habits have to start at home and speak. And I think some people pull their kids all the time because they just don't know. So one of the things that's making a comeback are the A through F grades. So that passed, so that's House Bill 1498. That passed committee on January 29th. And for those people that don't know, the last time we had grades issued was in 2018. Then after that, we switched over from iStep to iLearn. And because of that, we kind of hit pause. And then the COVID-19 pandemic happened. And then we got rid of IDOE Compass. And that was a website where you could look up information about schools. And then we switched over to the GPS dashboard. And the idea was, because even Secretary Jenner was in favor. She said she was in favor of using this GPS dashboard over the A through F grades because it had so they have a bigger picture. But now people are just saying like this A through F. So that They're supposed to be making a comeback. And I do agree with the comments about it. A through F does heavily focus on like, the I read, the I learn scores. And there's more to a school than just that. Because I do care. I care about your suspension and expulsion rates. I care about your attendance rates. There are other things I also care about. And then for me, because I am an educator, I also want to know about whether it's NWA or I Learn checkpoints or your common assessments. What other ways are you assessing my child that you are using? And I know all of that stuff won't necessarily would go public facing, but the reason we have to have this state level accountability because at the local level, y'all not communicating with parents. As a parent, I should be in the dark about whether my kid's school is failing. I should not be confused about whether teaching and learning is happening there. Like, you should be transparent. Because I know my sons, they are like, oh yeah, the principal, he went off on everybody. And I love their principal. I said, Mr. Pickup, he don't go off. and so I said, so what was he saying? And so paraphrasing my children, because he has like these grade level meetings or whatever. He was explaining to them like, y'all not ready for high school because some of y'all can't get to class on time. And they were listing some like how they were behind in some of these areas. But what was interesting to me is like my kids remember that was something that was said to them. Then my kids brought that home, and even my son's principal in his weekly email, he puts the attendance goal, I believe, is 97%, and then he puts what the percent is for the week. And so me as a parent, I'm looking to see like, oh, like that's important to the principal, and he's communicating to me as a parent. This is how the percentage of kids are showing up to school. So I just think there is some communication that should always come at the local level, regardless of what A through F, GPS dashboard, wherever flyer tool, where they try, and that whatever it is.
As teachers, look, if we can get that right, that's the charge and encouragement I hope you walk away from, not because we have answers, not because any of us have solutions. No, these are things of like, hey, be aware of this, be in the know as much as you can about certain things that may affect you. And most importantly, find your joy every single day. So when you're in your classroom doing things, if most of the time you're finding yourself stressed and you're finding yourself stressed and you really get to the root of why, it's probably because of an email from a colleague. It's probably from something your principal asked you to do. It's not the babies. It's not the students. So when you're in that space, enjoy being in that space because those are children. And they didn't get to wake up and choose their teacher. You got to wake up and choose where you've decided to teach and what job you decided to keep. So that is something that I'm very staunch on, that if you are no longer happy and you're not able to be there in a good spirit to serve, then reconsider where you're at, what you're doing. But for the most part, many of us, we're going to still keep doing what we do and we're going to still keep serving. And the climate is not super favorable right now for many things, but we could say that about any time in history, I think.
Yeah.
I think we could argue that about any time.
And we're not trying to be artificially happy or fake positive, whatever the word y'all using nowadays. We're just trying to be real that if I wrote something earlier, I'd be writing a lot on the internet, but I wrote about rage because I was really trying to get people to understand you cannot just live in a constant state of rage. Like, it harms your body. Like,
literally.
Stress harms your body. Anxiety harms your body. And so, like, I know a lot of the things that we talked about can be scary because we don't know the impact yet. But as you're staying informed by going to multiple sources, and we are just a source, okay? We are not the source, for a source. Usually, like, I listen to Shantae and Justine. Half of that stuff I don't know about. Okay, fair. Then you go to another source and listen to that as well, and then you draw some conclusion. And that was your free English lesson. If you wasn't paying attention to your English, right there. And I'm gonna add this.
She put a bow. She put a bow on all of that. Real nice.
Right. And make sure your other sources are reputable. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't go into our whole background, but we got degrees and experiences and licenses, and we do this work. So that makes us somewhat an experts on talking about these topics. But you want to make sure you're listening to experts, and Chat GPT didn't write your source. And please, I got one more thing. For the love of everything, quit sharing these like little boxes of stuff where there's no source to anything. Like, anybody can take in a little app and write blah 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 said this. Like, please get a source for real. Like, it drives me nuts. And I try to be really intentional as much as possible, sharing from the original source or directing you back to the original source. So I just had to get on the soapbox real quick.
No, hey, look, I'm with you on that. And also, don't make the mistake of being on social media or in the classroom, right? Don't underestimate your students. Don't underestimate your colleagues. I was conversing on Facebook in the comments with somebody recently, not a person I know personally. So obviously text is misconstrued, you all. Remember that. Text is heavily misconstrued. So anything written word, it's going to have usually like a 70% negative bend, I think, where it's like interpreted negatively. But this person, they fired back at me and they literally said, well, I'll converse with a person, but not Chat GPT. So this person didn't think it was possible for a human to write the comment that I wrote. Now, could it have been they looked at my name? Could they have possibly? And even if that wasn't true, I'm just saying, don't underestimate your students in that way either, because our students also are out there getting sources, even if they don't know where they were. They are consuming a lot more information than Shantae and I ever did watching Reading Rainbow. Like,
oh yeah, and I think I'm teaching a college class right now, and our last module we looked at how we talked about multimodal literacies and all of that stuff, and how, like, when you take something, you're reading the book. Free college lesson for y'all real quick. You're reading the book, you're going down the page, but when you're online, within that page, there could be a picture, there could be a meme, there could be a GIF, there could be a hyperlink that's take you to another page, there could be a video. And so with one thing, you went to all of these different directions. And I don't think sometimes people understand, when you're talking to kids, they have all of this extra information from going to one source that spiral into many sources. So I always say, check in with kids. Like, I ask my kids all the time, where did you hear that at? Oh, Mom, I was on this YouTube video. Hey, can you show me that video? Because I want to have an idea of who they're talking to, so I can say, hey, you see that right there? I don't think that person really knows, because kids, they're learning this. We, at least me, millennial, when we had to have a college email when Facebook came out to get on there. Now they just hopped in there and they're just on it, right? We kind of had an idea. We were more cautious, I would say. I felt like we were more cautious because it's a thing that's new. This has been their life. Everything's just around them all the time, where you can just click, go, and access things all the time. So, Justine, final thoughts about what people should do to stay informed about policy as we wrap up this episode?
I just want to say thank you for letting me come on your platform a little bit. And it's always a pleasure to connect with you and to collaborate on different work that we do. But I want to say thank you to you. And I would just say, stay encouraged. When you choose to look at fear and fear mongering, which unfortunately most of our media is in the United States, just remember, if it has commercials, it's not news. Look, it's just the truth. In other countries, when it's news, there's not commercials, because nobody got paid off to just report the facts. Okay, so that's one little thing. Just don't get so sucked into this echo chamber of like doom scrolling and fear and all that. Because if that's what lens we would have taken with even all of these topics, like, we would both be crying right now. If we were taking what these things actually said without us picking apart and having some semblance of human dialogue, we would both be crying because this is awful. Like, the way how a lot of things are written and comes down the pipe. And then we look at 10 years later, how did we get to where we're at that moment? So I would say, live each moment enjoy time with your kids and your students if you're an educator, but just take things a breath at a time, because you're not going to upend a bunch of political policy in one day, but you can make a difference with the little people that are in your classroom, in your house every day. That's what I would say.
Well, thanks. And I was to piggyback on what Justine said and to close off tonight, I would say reset your algorithm. One of the things that I did, I recently left TikTok. I only got on there in 2022 due to some of my college students. So I know some of them were very upset that I deleted my account, but I deleted it right before.
I did look for you to tag. I did look for you to tag the other day. I said, oh, well, she won't be in my recipe video.
I told you I got off there.
I forgot. I was like, where's Educator Barnes? Oh, no.
Oh, no. I did have some TikToks that actually went viral unbeknownst to.
Yeah, you did.
I did. But I had to leave because I was on there too much. But the algorithm got really good at showing me what I wanted to see and showing me things that I engaged with. I'm still on Facebook and Instagram as Educator Barnes and YouTube, so you can find me there. But what I mean by that is sometimes I watch one. So, for example, Grammys happened last night, and Kanye West popped up on my thing, and I went to go see what the heck was happening. I'm not even going to talk about what happened, but then after that, I got like 6 other things that popped up. So you know what I did? I went to the search bar and I searched for hydroponics for gardening, because I'm actually trying to do that right now. And guess what I'm seeing now? I'm seeing, get this garden bed, do this. So that's what I mean by reset your algorithm. Yes, you got to stay in tune. But when you like, okay, I already heard about this. This is a bit much. Put something else in front of your face. That's how you stay balanced in this world. You can't just, because you'll get the echo chamber of just showing you everything that you didn't want to see or everything that's negative. So that's my thing. Stay tuned into policy. And then when you like, okay, I need to take a break from this, search for something else. It will literally start showing you something a little bit different. So I do that all the time. And I won't. Mr. Barnes, he likes watching like silly little videos. And it's funny, our algorithms are totally different. His is like peace. Mine is always like social justice warrior. Let's go. And then I got to read it.
That's about how me and Mr. Scott's are. Or I just hear all of a sudden.
Yeah. Or give
your
phone to your boo and let them search on it, and then maybe you get some different stuff on there.
Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah, it would probably be mine would probably be weirder, to be honest. You know what that would be? I will never forget. I won't say anything else after this, but it is fitting. I will never forget a sermon I heard when I was little, and the pastor was like on the soapbox about what movies people were watching. So at that time, the church library had VHSs you could check out. So they were only Christian movies. But he said, if your life was a movie and we could see all of your thoughts, would you be ashamed of them? And now I'm going to be like, well, somebody can on your phone see that you were like, can I make muffins out of spinach and banana?
Yes, and you should follow. Oh, Justine, how can people follow you?
Oh, well, a multitude of ways, but for sure, check out, and Shantae's going to be a guest again on Love Learning You. So I have a YouTube channel at Love Learning You, and that's also the name of my podcast. So very open, honest conversations about culture and communication mainly.
All right. Well, check out Justine there. Hit us up in the comments whenever you watch the playback. And until next time, and another episode will be coming sooner rather than later.
Thank you.